I don't remember if I had told you about this book. I've found it very helpful in our discussions with the English grammar. It's kind of a reference guide. I don't know if have I shown this to you guys? An A to Z of English grammar and usage. It's by Jeffrey Leach. But
Privilege.
I will post a post a reference online. I don't know how easy it would be to get access to this, but I found it very helpful in our discussions because it's not a grammar per se, like it doesn't have chapters on each topic, but basically it's anything in the English language, whether it's a particular word or or a grammatical expression. It will, so if you're like, for example, if you were saying we're going to talk about prepositions today, so if you were wanted to get a quick review of prepositions, you know, you could look up and it'll give you a couple of pages discussing prepositions, common prepositions, how they work. Then it'll talk about a prepositional phrase. Or let's say you see a word, the word unless, and you're wondering now, was that a conjunction or a preposition? And you can look up the word unless, and there's a whole little section on unless. It's like a paragraph, and it just says it's a subordinating conjunction, and then it gives a few examples. So it's kind of a nice resource that I found. But like I said, I don't know how accessible it will be for you guys to get a hold of it or not. But if that's something, Pastor Bobby, you can get for the library there or something, at
Yeah.
least to have.
Yeah,
Very
we try
useful.
to.
There's a lot
Because I
of
think
English grammars out there, but so many are very technical and, you know,
Pastor Tim,
yeah.
maybe we can ask Sir Sid what we're using. We have a module, Pastor Tim, in the school for English grammar.
That's
The one
the
we use
English
with
module,
Michael.
sir.
Oh. We had
The one
Michael.
we uh
Yeah. Okay. I'm
that
sorry.
grammar is given to the graders until grade 6. The grammar that we are talking about is given to the graders until grade 6. Because high schools more on composition, writing, and literature.
Yeah.
They are using paragraph constructions like that,
Which,
and they are going to form speeches. But basically, grammars given to the graders up to grade 8 or the second year here in our educational system for the English.
and that's similar actually to at least my experience in the States, where we were taught grammar when we were young. But the problem is, um, you don't really, you know, little kids don't really care. They'll memorize, you know, okay, a noun is a person, place, or thing, you know, parts of speech. But I think as far as how a
They will just
language
parrot it.
works, yeah, right. So I know for many of my peers, we always talk about, you know, English grammar. We never listened. You know, we were young kids. It didn't seem important at the time because we knew how to speak the language. So why do we need grammar? You know, I know how to talk. So, and then when you got to writing, you know, that could be helpful. But even then, I think that's the good time maybe to talk a little bit about grammar. But by then it's been taught so many times. I think the high school system, they think, oh, we just give you books and you write essays and the critical thinking. But I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe when next time I come out there, I'd like to take a look at what you're using and see how that is. But like I said, there's so much. Like, look at this book, right? I mean, look how thick it is. It's 570 pages, and you know, there's a lot of information in there, and a lot of it's technical and maybe not so helpful. So, Pastor Bobby?
Yeah. Pastor Tim, if I may, reinforce, what you are saying. Um, I am one who is of the conviction. I really have strong beliefs that if if we are provided, if a child is provided or a person is provided a strong foundation in the English grammar, okay, it will open up a door for him for more learning and greater learning. In fact, broader learning. Okay, and the reason why I say that is for the following reason. One, I am somebody who's like that positive. I never reached college. I never even finished high school.
Mm.
I did not finish high school. Okay, I only had 2 years of high school education. But from elementary to those 2 years of high school, I really focus on learning the English grammar. We have a curriculum in our school before called SRA.
Yeah, I use
Speed
that as,
reading.
yeah,
Yeah, you had that, Positive.
yeah, yeah.
And that was really my favorite. I really latch on that and
Mm.
focus on that. So I learned essay writing, I learned diagramming, I learned some of them I forgot already today, but that built up my foundation. So that's why I say I'm one who had that strong foundation and early foundation of that. So right now I can see it how it plays out now in my life today. I can study anything. I can learn anything, most especially in the English medium, as
Mm.
far as the English medium, which is basically everything now. Um, so that's the reason also, Pastor Tim, number two, we chose accelerated Christian education, ACE, because
Mhm.
it provides that strong foundation at the beginning years. I think Pastor Tim can, Sir Sid can confirm that. But that's Pastor Tim. I'm sorry for.
No, thank you. I think it's one of those things where you need to learn certain things to provide the foundation, and then hopefully at some point you can appreciate that foundation and then use it for, like you said, Pastor Bobby, now, being able to understand the language better, that opens up a lot of doors for you to, and especially when we're looking at scripture, right? I mean, that's what we're here for. And so we want to understand the grammar as best we can so that it will give us the tools for, for uncovering the meaning. I think I used the illustration a while back of like an archaeologist. He has these certain tools that he'll use to uncover artifacts, bones or buildings or pottery or art or something. But he uses certain tools. He won't go in with a sledgehammer, and start breaking up the ground, because if there's a fragile skull underneath, he's going to destroy it. So he has to use certain kinds of shovels and then maybe little brushes and different kinds of brushes. And so he has to use the right tools or he's not going to accomplish his job. And I think for us, it's the same, obviously, with interpreting the Bible. We have to use the right tools, and grammar is a big one. It's not the only tool, but it's a big one. Authorial intent is sort of the overarching or foundation, right? We had inerrancy is the biggest foundation, and then on top of that's authorial intent. Those two really form the foundation for a correct approach to interpreting the Bible. And then one of those other pillars that are built on top of that authorial intent is grammar, because the author, uses grammar to communicate the truth. The Spirit, utilizes the language that the author grew up with. So I think that's why grammar is a key tool. It's not the only one, but it's an important one as we go through this process. So like I said, I think it's helpful to have some English resources, grammar resources, if you can get some, just as a helpful tool. But the more you can do this on your own, and that's my goal, by hopefully in a few weeks when we've covered all of these connector words, my goal is that you don't have to try to memorize or remember a bunch of these words. But if you can just see what's going on in the sentence, if you can identify clauses, if you can identify nouns, and if you can identify a connector word, maybe you don't know what kind it is, but there are clues within the sentence that tell you where they are and what they are. And so my hope is that, if you memorize just a few things, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned like 17 short words. If you can memorize those, amboy, of course, and then a with boot for the prepositions, which we'll look at in a moment. And then the 3 relative pronouns, who, which, and that. That will provide you, with a core. But then if you can remember, okay, I just want to see what follows that connector word. Is it a phrase? Is it a clause? Is it a noun? And what follows that connector word will give us a clue as to what kind of connector word it is. So that's been our focus the last few weeks, and it will continue to be the next few weeks. But my desire is then when you look at a paragraph, you'll be able to see fairly quickly where the connector words are, and then with just a little bit of thought, you'll be able to identify what kinds of words those are. Brother Arn sent me he did the Ephesians 6 example, and he identified the conjunctions and the prepositions, and almost, I just have to say, he did a great job identifying those. I don't know how long that took you, brother, but my desire is to be, you can look at a paragraph and kind of begin to just see it right away. It's funny now, guys, after doing all this English grammar with you, when I'm singing songs on Sunday morning, I'm diagramming the song in my head just by accident, because I'm thinking, oh, that's a prepositional phrase. That instead. So you guys have corrupted me. Now I can't even sing a song and enjoy the hymn. I'm thinking about the grammar. So this is a problem.
Did you notice the wrong grammar, Pastor Kim?
Yeah, sometimes I did. Sometimes I did. It's bad. But it's poetry. So poetry, you're allowed some flexibility with the language, which we will talk about in Module 3. That's one of the features with poetry, is not as literal in places. And so it's going to use grammar, but there will be some flexibility in how the grammar is used, like word order. And lots of times there'll be words left out that are intended to be there, but for poetic reasons, those words will be gone. The connector words, there's very few connector words in poetry compared to the epistles. So you have to really understand what's going on in the poem in order to see how these verses are being connected together, because they are connected together in the author's mind, in the poet's mind. But how they're connected, a lot of times we don't have the clues like we do in an epistle, where there's lots of connector words that help us out. But in poetry, there's fewer connector words, especially the conjunctions. A lot of the conjunctions are not in Hebrew poetry. Not as many are in Hebrew poetry. So that's something we're going to have to tackle or face when we get to it. But I think, at least for now, we're trying to just get better prepared for epistles, and even for the instructional portions of narratives, where the speaker is giving instruction. I think, the same kinds of, the same approach can be taken in those parts as we are with the epistles. So that's why we ended up doing this whole section on English grammar, because there are a few portions in John chapter 4 that we can diagram that will be helpful to diagram, because Jesus is giving instruction in those particular cases. So eventually, Lord willing, we will get back to John 4. If you remember, that's where we started this journey. And at the end of our session today, I did want to talk about, our plan starting next week. We have to get on finishing getting our assignments completed. Yeah. So that plan
Next
will
week,
begin next
I
week.
will be next week, Pastor Tim. I will be hibernating already.
Another quarantine, a Taya
Complete
quarantine.
assignment quarantine.
I am Taya assignment quarantine.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I've tried to spread those out, one, so that we can get them done. So I'll get to that in the last 20 minutes or so of our time together. So that gives us about an hour to dive into what you've been waiting for and excited for the entire week, and that is the English grammar. Now today,
Grammar.
you look at Anselmo, he's so excited. He's about ready to take a nap. All right.
Nosebleed, sir.
Nosebleed already? Oh, we're in trouble. Okay.
Anselmo, your home alone, your home alone posture.
Okay. Let's get to, as I said, we've spent a good amount of time on we're still in the second step. We're trying to go through identifying the phrases and clauses, and we do that with knowing what the connector words are. And we've spent, I've shown you this picture. I'll keep showing it to you just to keep it stuck in our minds. Again, we can see these connector words which link these clauses and phrases together. And there are, again, 4 types: the conjunctions, prepositions, relative pronouns, and the participles. And we have spent a lot of time on these conjunctions. All right, so I thought it'd be good to move to the second connector word today. We've already brought up prepositions in the past, but I went back to conjunctions just to reinforce a few things, to help give you some tools to be able to better identify the conjunctions. And again, we have the two kinds. We have the coordinating conjunctions, which are made up of, and, boy, and, nor, but, or, yet. But then there are the subordinating conjunctions, which is a much larger group. So it'd be too difficult or too much time to actually go through and memorize all of them. And so we discussed some ways to be able to identify those by looking for a dependent clause, looking for a subject and verb which follows that particular word, and that would indicate that we have subordinating conjunction. So the next kind of connector word, and this is one we're going to focus our time on probably this week and next week, and that is prepositions. And really, a preposition, you can think of as a simple definition of it is just that it links a noun to another word. They usually connect the noun to a word they modify by indicating such things as a direction, a location, a purpose, a possession, source, a means, time. These are how prepositions connect. And so one group of prepositions, which I think, there's at least 150 of them in the English language, probably even more. Now, the most common ones, the most common 9 are these, and I think I introduced this to you when we first brought up prepositions. A whiff boot. Now, a whiff, I don't know what a whiff is. It's not a wife, okay, not a whip, but W-I-F-F. If you can memorize this, the acronym that stands for at, with, if, for, from, by, on, of, and to. Those are the 9 most common prepositions. Of course, there's many, many more, but those particular ones are used more often than the rest. I don't know the percentage, but just keep those in mind. If you can memorize, in addition to and boy, again, and boy is the coordinating conjunction. So we memorize that because that'll help us when we're trying to identify conjunctions, because if it's not and boy, then it's going to be a subordinating conjunction. And boy was just the 5 words and, nor, but, or, and yet. So to that, I'm adding 9 more. And these are 9 prepositions. Okay, not coordinating conjunction, that's and boy. But here we're gonna, I really encourage you to memorize a with boot. Okay, because those are gonna appear more common than others. Now, as you think about, for example, these particular prepositions, you know, if you look at the word at, for example, that typically tells us what? Sir Sid, what does at inform us about? When you use the preposition at, what is it going to be telling us?
Location.
Location, answering the question where.
Where?
Yes. So she was at home. Okay, location. Also, at can tell us another.
Time.
Or
When?
yeah, time. When?
When?
I will call you at 5 p.m. Okay, there it's indicating time. All right. Now, if we look at, for example, the next one there, with, Pastor Bowlby, what can the preposition with tell us? What does it usually indicate?
What? With is indicating, how or what.
Okay, so means how, or when you say what, can you give me an example?
He hit the ball with a bat.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the means, right? The how. How did he hit the ball? Another with also sometimes will tell us location.
Location. Okay.
For example, I am going to be with Pastor Bowlby. Okay, so that's the idea of a location, a proximity. All right. So all of these carry, the preposition carries some sort of connection. In this case, oh, it's not in. I'm sorry. I don't know how that got here. It's in, if. It's in.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
with, for example, in this example that you use, the sentence, could it be also whom, with who?
With whom? Well, yeah, you might say, with whom are you
With.
traveling?
With whom are you with?
Yeah, with whom are you with? Yeah, so in this case, the with is, again, an idea of a location in a sense, where, proximity. So each of these, for, often has the idea when it's used as a preposition, a reason or a purpose. So it's answering the question of why. From can be a location or a source, the source of something. So a location might be, he came from Cebu. Or a source might be, children come from their parents. Okay?
Or time, Pastor Tim.
Or time. Give me an example for time.
From long ago. From.
Okay, the Bible was written from long ago. Okay, yeah, so sometimes it can be time. Okay, and this is the case. What's interesting with prepositions is they often don't have just one way they connect. That's what makes them a little more challenging when we do interpretation. So you can't always say, oh, it's the word with. That always means how. Well, no, not. Sometimes it can mean like a location or a proximity. Or from. You can see here, there's a few different possibilities. Or by. By can have the idea of means. You know, again, how. Or it can be location.
Location again.
Right? Because he went to the house by the river. Okay, that's a location. Or he went to the house by a taxi. That's means, that's how he went. Okay? Again, notice there's a difference in the same word by can have two different ways that it connects. The noun, and notice this case, he went to the house by the river. By is my preposition, and then it's connecting that noun river. Okay? Now, the next step will be, what is it connecting it to? And that we'll cover that in a minute, but these are just a few examples. Okay, on. Pastor Allen, how might the preposition on be used? Can you think of anything, ideas?
Location, sir.
Okay, location.
Yes.
The plate was on the table.
Sorry, I was muted earlier.
Oh, what did you say?
Location, exactly.
Okay,
location. I said that.
Okay, good. Okay, so location. Another might be,
Time.
will you be on time today?
Time.
So we have there, maybe the word time is actually
Time.
used there.
On the first day of the week.
Yeah, good. That's a
Believe
good
that
example.
in the Bible. Okay.
On the first day, God said, let there be light. Okay, so good. That's a good example of time.
Location.
On,
Okay.
on or before. On or before. Deadline.
Okay, or of, excuse me. Of is usually possession or identification. Which one? So right, you know, the angel of the Lord. Which angel? It's identifying a particular angel. The gospel of peace. What kind of gospel? Which gospel? Okay. And you know, of is used. Of is one of the most common English words used. I think of, in, and for. I think those are 3 of the top 10 English words used in English. And then finally we have 2.
Pastor
Yeah.
Pastor Tim, the of can also be used as a source that is similar in meaning of from.
Yeah, good point. So of or source. Can you give me an example?
Blessings of the Lord.
Okay. We have
We receive
received
blessings.
the blessings of salvation, or the blessings of the Lord are upon you. Okay. Yeah, of is used quite extensively. And that's why I put possession there. Maybe I should say possession or source. Might convey that idea. All right. So this just, I wanted to show you of these, you know, in these 9 most common prepositions, a with boot, notice every one of them has at least more than one way that it's used. Okay. This is what makes prepositions a little bit of a challenge when it comes to biblical interpretation. But the first step is identifying that we have a preposition, as opposed to a conjunction or as opposed to a participle, because understanding that it's a preposition will tell us some things. All right, it will tell us some things about what it's doing and how it's connecting. So let me first give you, so we have some examples. And I'll just, we'll start with, again, with you, Pastor Allen. Just let me know, tell me what the preposition is and what it's doing in the sentence here, all right? So for example, I live by the store. What's the preposition here?
By.
Okay, the preposition is by. And then what noun is it linking? Meaning what noun follows it?
The store.
Okay, good. And so it's linking the noun, I'll just put noun, is the store, the noun being linked. And what is it linking it to, you think? Or how is it working in this sentence?
Identifying identifying the location of my house.
Yeah, of where in this case, where I live. We'll just use the words that are used
Yes,
in the
where I live.
sentence. Yeah. So again, here in the sense of a location. All right, good. All right, Anselmo, let me give you a sentence. I'll have you, well, we actually, this is Pastor Bobby. Let's see, he preached after breakfast. Tell me what the preposition is, and then what is the noun that it's linking?
Sir, who will answer, sir?
What's that?
Who will answer?
You.
No,
Anselmo, you, yeah. Can you tell me what the preposition is in this sentence? He preached after breakfast.
after, sir.
Okay. What's the noun that it's linking?
Breakfast.
Okay, and how is it linking that noun? What is it linking it to, and how is it linking it?
I think, sir. It also tell us, sir, that he preached after breakfast. Maybe telling us the time.
Yeah, it identifies when he preached. Okay, think of these prepositions. They're going to function in one of two ways. All right. If you noticed when we went through these prepositions, I put in parentheses, I put these words: where, why, when, how, which one. Okay, did you guys notice that when we were going through them? So actually,
Yes,
what we're
Pastor
going to
Tim.
be doing is you're going to have certain questions that these prepositions answer. They'll answer either why, how, when, where, and those are going to indicate that those are certain questions, or what kind, which one. So that's how when I ask
Preposition
you,
functions as
Yes, sir.
say again,
Eh,
Sid.
prepositions functions as adverb or adjective
Yes. So
from the questions given.
exactly. So if they answer questions like why, how, when, or where, it's going to function like an adverb, and that means it's going to modify
The verb.
a verb. If it's answering questions like which one or what kind,
Modified the noun.
or whose, like which, the possession, it's going to modify a noun. Okay. Which really kind of takes us into the next section I wanted to talk about is, so how do we identify how do we identify which word the prepositional phrase is modifying? Okay, I already gave you a sort of a preview of that, but let's sort of take a step back, and like we did with conjunctions, where I sort of tried to give you a process to identify whether you have a conjunction or not. Remember I said first, check to see if what follows that connecting word. Is it a clause? Then it is likely going to be a conjunction. Well, in a preposition, we want to first confirm that we have a preposition by noting what follows it. Again, what follows a preposition, guys? By definition, preposition is followed by a noun, right? That's the
Yeah.
definition of a preposition.
The
Now
principle
what we
you
want,
gave earlier, Pastor.
what's that?
Preposition. The principle you gave us earlier, last time.
Yes,
Prepositions are followed usually by a noun.
yes. They'll be followed by a noun. So first, when you're looking at a sentence and you have a connector word and you think it's a preposition, just make sure to confirm that by looking at what follows it. And that should be a noun. So for example, in the two examples we looked at, I live by the store. Here's the preposition, and here's the noun that follows it. There's not a clause here. There's just the noun. He preached after. There's my preposition. And then breakfast. There's my noun. Now, he didn't say he preached. Well, I'll leave it there for now. Okay. So that's what we're looking for, is a noun, to make sure we confirm we have a preposition. So we first look on what follows the preposition to make sure we have a preposition, and then we look at what precedes the preposition. That is, what word does the preposition immediately come after? And usually, not always, but often, that is the word that the preposition is modifying. Okay? We saw that in our two examples. I live by the store. In this case, by the store modifies live. It's telling us where I live. In the second example, he preached after breakfast. Well, again, after immediately follows, it comes after the word preached. And in this case, it modifies preach by telling us when he preached. Okay? So that's the second thing you want to look for. First, confirm you have a preposition by looking at what follows it. All right? So we can think of it this way. We have a phrase or a clause plus the connector word, plus if it's a preposition, I'll just put it this way. If I say a connector word, which is a preposition, that means it's going to be followed by a noun.
Yeah.
Okay? So if my connector word's a preposition, it's followed by a noun or a noun clause. And then in this part, now what we're looking for is what does the word, what word comes before it? So we might have a clause or a phrase plus the preposition plus the noun. Okay, now we're interested in the first one. We're interested in what follows the preposition. Now we're interested in what comes right before the preposition, because often that is the word that it modifies. And then what you're going to do is ask yourself, does that make sense? So for example, we go back. I live by the store. Now, if by modifies live, does that make sense? Well, it can make sense if it's telling us where. All right. Now, when we go through some examples, I think this step will make more sense to you as a check. But basically what it is so we identify what follows the preposition to make sure it is a preposition. And then we look at what comes before the preposition to see if that is the word it modifies. And so to do that, we just ask ourselves, does it make sense? And if it doesn't, then we look at the word right before that word. And we just go all the way, keep going backwards into the sentence to see if we can find the word that this phrase modifies. And then the last thing is we want to ask ourselves is, well, how does it modify it? And that's where those questions come in. If it's where, when, why, or how, it's modifying a verb. If it's what kind or who or which one, actually should be, it's going to modify a noun. Okay, now that may not make a lot of sense yet. So let's look at some examples to help clarify what I'm talking about. So basically what we have here is this idea of one, look for what follows the preposition. Two, look for what comes before the preposition. And three, ask, does it make sense? And then four is, how does the preposition modify? That's a shorthand version. So let's just do some examples where hopefully this will make sense what I'm doing. All right, so I'll do the first one and then I'll be asking you guys to do the rest. Okay, so we're just going to look at some simple sentences first. Now here in this sentence, I'm looking at, I've got she, the subject, walk, the verb, and then I have this phrase between the posts. So it looks like to me a preposition, this word between. All right, so I ask myself, is between followed by a noun? Yes, it's followed by the word posts. Technically, it's followed by the posts, but we understand the is an adjective here. It's an article. So it's specifically posts, which is a noun. So yes, I have a preposition. Now I ask myself, what does the preposition come after? Well, it comes after the word walked. Okay? So now I ask myself, okay, could it make sense that the preposition is modifying that word walked? And I would say it does make sense, or it can make sense, if between is telling us where she walked. All right, so yeah, that would make sense. It's telling us a location. So what does it modify? I've confirmed that it modify, and in this case, it's just one sentence. So there's not a lot of choices here, okay? But we're just trying to get the idea of the process, and we'll get more complicated sentences in a minute. So what does it modify? Well, I would say between the posts modifies she walked, telling us where she walked. All right, and that makes sense if I go back to, remember the question, if it's answering the question where, then it's going to modify a verb, and that's exactly what we see here. Telling us where, and that's modifying the verb walked. Okay, so everything makes sense. Okay, let's try another example, and this time we'll ask Brother Arn. We'll ask the masked man to make sure to unmute yourself, and then let's just go through these 4 steps on this sentence. All right. So you ready, Brother Arn?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So let's do the first. Where do you see a potential preposition here in this sentence?
The students are at.
Okay, at. All right, let's confirm that by asking what follows at.
Noun. School.
Yeah, school, which is a noun. So we're okay. So preposition, it's confirmed. Now, what does the preposition come after? What word does the preposition follow?
At school.
So school comes after the preposition. What comes before it? What's the word right before preposition?
Before students. Nouns.
Okay, we have another word actually before that, right? If you go this direction, are, right? So are comes before at.
Before preposition. At.
Okay, so now we have to ask the question, does it make sense, could it make sense that at school could modify that verb are?
No. R is referring to the plurality of the numbers of the students.
Yeah, it's plural. It's a plural verb. Okay. We could say, let me go down here.
Are is verb to be.
Are is a verb. So if at school modifies are, we have to ask, is there a way that at school could modify that? Again, it's saying this is a verb of being. All right. It's saying,
Yes.
and so we want to ask ourselves, is it possible that at school could modify are? What question could it answer? At school tells us what? Is that a location? Is that a time? Is that a
Where?
it's
Where?
telling us where. Good. So if it's telling us where, then it has to modify a verb or a noun. Which one? Remember our discussion up here. I'll bring that down here. If it's answering the question where, then it's going to modify what?
Verb.
A verb.
Verb.
Verb are.
Now, the only verb we have in this sentence is the verb are.
Ah.
Okay?
It
So
is in the present.
this means that it can make sense that at school modifies the verb are, telling us where the students are.
verb shall be.
Yes.
You guys see that? Where are the students? They are at school.
At school.
Okay, so this one's a little bit more tricky, but I just wanted you to see that. So that's what our summary would be. That at school modifies are, telling us where students are, okay?
It's a
Yes.
verb to be in the plural form.
Yeah, and in this case, yeah, are, A-R-E is a verb, and it's a plural verb, as you said, right? Because
Because the noun
is would be singular.
Yeah.
But in
Is
this case,
the-
yeah, the student's plural. If
Because
I had
the
said the student
plural.
is at school, that would be singular. Okay, let's keep working at this. We're gonna have to do several examples to sort of get used to what's going on here. All right, Pastor Noor, time for you to have a nosebleed. Are you with us, Pastor Noor? How's your connection? I can't tell. Can you
he
unmute?
drove his
My
car.
signal,
His,
the signal is bad here. Connection is bad.
Oh,
Is
okay.
everything choppy.
Too choppy? All right. We'll let you pass.
I
Just this
cannot catch
time.
up.
Okay.
His preposition
Yeah,
is not so
nothing.
clear.
His preposition is
Brother
not
Nor's
clear.
preposition is not so clear.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay. Michael, are you there?
Michael.
Yes.
Michael.
All right. Let's have you try this sentence out. Do you see any prepositions in this sentence?
To and in.
Okay, good. So we actually have two prepositions in this sentence. Let's talk about the first one. Is the preposition here, is it followed by a noun? The preposition to.
Pronoun.
Well, yeah, it's his. It's his house, but in this case, is this a preposition? Is this a noun phrase here, or are there any verbs in it? That's what we're looking for.
No verb.
No verbs. So it is followed by the noun house. Okay, technically it's his house, but his is telling us which house. That's an adjective, right? So
His is a possessive pronoun following the house.
yeah.
It's a pronoun.
but the noun is the house that we're interested in. So it is a preposition. It's followed by, it's not followed by a clause, it's followed by a noun. And what does a preposition come after? Or maybe I should be asking it, what comes right before preposition? That's probably a better way to word this.
Is car.
Car. Okay. So we ask ourselves this question.
Does it make sense?
Does it make sense? And by that I mean, does it make sense that whoops, next one. Does it make sense that
It modifies car.
makes sense that to modifies car, or technically to his house? What do you think, Michael? So by that I mean, it means is to his house telling us something about the car itself?
Yes.
Is it describing something about the car itself? Is it telling us which car?
Not
What
no,
kind of car? Is it describing the car?
No, Pastor Tim.
It's not, right?
No, yes.
So it doesn't make sense. At least there's nothing I can think of where that would make sense, that to his house is describing or modifying the car in some way. So we have to go, okay, what's the next possible word that would make sense here?
Drove.
A verb.
Drove. Let's try that. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
That to his house modifies drove. Okay, is there some way that to his house could be modifying drove? In other words, what question could it answer about drove?
Where? Where?
Yes. If it is telling us where he drove. Okay? And in this case, that makes sense. He drove his car. Where? To his house. So to his house is modifying drove. It's telling us where the action, you know, the direction or where the particular action was happening. We're back to, again, these questions. These questions are going to come up over and over again, and especially when we get to the diagramming phase, we're going to be asking these very same questions. So summary, say to his house modifies drove, telling us where he drove. Okay, are there any questions on that one?
Here.
Well, let's keep going, all right? We'll just do several examples and hopefully through that. So that was the first preposition. Now we have the second one that we want to consider, and that is the preposition in. In the mountains is the prepositional phrase. So we want to ask ourselves, and Michael, we'll keep with you on this. First, we ask what follows the preposition.
Definite article and mountain noun.
Okay, so it is followed by a noun, correct? All right, so now we ask ourselves what comes before
His house.
the preposition.
No.
Which house?
Yeah, we have that word house. So we ask ourselves, okay, does house, does it make sense that, or maybe we can say, yeah, does it make sense that in the mountains could modify house. So by that, we're asking ourselves, okay, in what way, if it's modifying house, in what way could it be modifying house?
It makes sense, Pastor Tim, because uh, it answers the question where the house is located.
Okay, well, here's a little bit of a trick. If it's answering the question where, and it is telling us a location, if it's answering the question where, let's remember, what would we be saying?
It will be
That it's had to modify a verb, right?
verb, yes.
And the verb here is drove. But did he drive in the mountains?
No.
Yeah, it's not telling it. He ended up at a place in the mountains, but it's not saying he drove in the mountains. It's saying he drove his car to his house, and then we have that phrase in the mountains. So this is this is where you really have to give some thought, where English can be a little bit confusing.
But
Okay.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
I think the one you taught us about proximity,
Where the house
Pastor Tim,
apply it to the nearest proximity.
Yeah, that's what this number 2 is telling us. Let's first look at the thing closest to it and see if it makes sense.
Pastor
Sid?
Tim,
Yeah.
the question to be asked is which house?
Yes.
That's adjective.
Yeah, so another option is, so one option is where, and that would mean then that in the mountains modifies drove, because where will always modify a verb if it's answering a question where. But another possibility is which house? The house in the mountains, that house. All right, and in that case, it could make sense. This would mean if it's answering which house in the mountains could modify house by telling us which house. Remember I told you guys before, we have this preposition in. Sometimes it refers to location. But in this, sometimes it can refer, in this case, for example, to which one?
Which one? Which one?
Okay, which house? And that's why I said, as Pastor Bobby mentioned a moment ago, this idea of proximity. In the English language, it's important, and in Greek as well, there's this idea of proximity. Usually, the preposition goes to what's closest to it. Now, you stress the word usually, not always. All right? So that's why we first check the word that's right before it. And in this case, it's the word house. And we ask ourselves, okay, house is the closest word. Is there a way that in the mountains could modify house? And we say, yeah, it could tell us which house. So yes, there is a way that in the mountains could modify house. So that's why we say, does it make sense? And then again, using this rule of proximity, then the most likely answer here is that the sentence is telling us which house. Now, if I had worded the sentence this way, let me go down here. He drove his car in the mountains to his house. What did I change?
The prepositional phrase.
Yeah, here's the first one.
You reversed.
I took the prepositional phrase and I moved it.
You reverse. You
Whoops.
moved.
I didn't move it there. I moved it here. Right? So before it was here. And so the closest word right before it was house. And then we ask ourselves, okay, is there a way that in the mountains could modify house? Is there a way that that would make sense? And we say, yeah, it's answering the question, which house? Because perhaps he has a house in the valley, or he has a house on the beach. But here he drove his car to his house in the mountains, that house. And so I put in the mountains here after house in order to specify which house. Now, if I wanted to specify where he drove, I would put the prepositional phrase closer to that verb. I could have said he drove in the mountains to his car. Now that's kind of an awkward way to say it in English. But technically that would be the clearest idea if I wanted to emphasize in this case where he drove. But see, I worded the sentence here in such a way that I wanted to emphasize the location of his house. So in is functioning in a way like a location, but here it's a identifier, which house, not where he drove. So just by the position of the prepositional phrase, that gives me an idea of what I'm modifying. And so that's why I put in this process that third step, or second and third step, because first I'm asking, okay, what word comes before the preposition? We're going to check this rule of proximity. Does the rule of proximity, that's really what this is, does the rule of proximity make sense in this case? And again, the rule of proximity is essentially this. It modifies the word closest to it. All right? But that's not always the case. Okay? This is not always true. It is often true, and that's why we do a check. Okay, so the rule of proximity tells me that house is the word that in the mountains modifies. Let's test that. So maybe a better way to say this is test the rule of proximity. All right, so we're going to test the rule of proximity. And maybe better to say, how could in the mountains modify house and make sense? It's probably a better way to ask the question. All right, and then we ask that, well, it could make sense. It could make sense if in the mountains is telling us which house. Okay, and if it's telling us which house, then I use my check here. Okay, which one? Okay, that's going to modify a noun, so it grammatically this is acceptable. So I would conclude that in the mountains does modify house, telling us which house. Okay? So that's what we're doing here. We're essentially seeing if the rule of proximity makes sense. Because in English, prepositions usually modify the word that comes that it comes after, or the word which comes before the preposition. But not always. That's why we have to ask ourselves, does it make sense? All right. Any questions?
So, Pastor Tim, we really go for the rule. That's the rule of grammar.
That's where we're starting. All right. Now, again, we're going to see some examples here in the next couple examples where the rule of proximity does not make sense. Well, in fact, I think we saw it actually in the first example, didn't we? Well, yeah, in this example, to his house. Remember we said does the rule of proximity would say that it modifies car. Okay, so the rule of proximity says to his house modifies car. But now we have to ask ourselves, does that make sense? How could to his house modify car? And it doesn't. There's nothing that would make sense. Now, if it says if he said he drove his car, which was at his house, that would make sense. But in this case, there's nothing that would make sense. There's no question here that could be answered that would give sense to this. So that we have to say, okay, the rule of proximity then says, all right, let's try the next possibility, which would be drove. Okay, the next possibility is drove. Does that make sense? And then we said, yes, if to his house is answering the question where he drove. Okay? So this can appear to be somewhat complicated. And I can understand that appearance. So what I'm trying to do is just show you a step-by-step way to figure out what these prepositional phrases are modifying. And really the way to do that is you have to start with the proximity rule. Okay, what's closest? Is there any way that that makes sense? And then if not, you go, okay, what's the next closest possibility?
Mr. Tim,
Yes.
comment. May I appreciate it very much in you, establishing in us the rules of grammars, the rule of the English grammar. No, I can highly appreciate that now because as you are pointing out to us, even previously, that there are some situations where we really need to apply our discretion based on context. There on the paper number 3 said, does it make sense in the context? So the context, as you pointed out previously also, is the king. Context is king. So there are situations where we have to apply discretion, and understanding the rule of grammar all the more gives us the ability and the skill to be able to apply proper discretion.
Yeah, and in these sentences, we only have a short sentence, so we don't have a lot of context, but often what will happen when we have longer sentences, or maybe we have a paragraph, there will be other clues in the paragraph that will help us as well. So yeah, I think that phrase, as you mentioned, Pastor Bobby, in the context is very important to consider, but some of these short sentences, it's a little bit harder to see a context because it's just a short example.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is the key.
Yeah. For example, last time, I still remember you were pointing out to us that the preposition is not functioning as a preposition; it's functioning as a conjunction. You remember
Yes.
the for? I can remember the word for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the previous lesson, you said that it was not functioning as a preposition; it was functioning as a conjunction.
That's right.
Because it was followed by an independent clause.
Yeah, it was followed by a clause, and that tells us then that if, and that's why we're doing this check here, is it followed by a noun? Because if it's not, then we don't have a preposition. we have something else. Okay. So let me just, I'll run through myself just one more example. We'll do some more next week, but let me kind of do this example with you. And then we got to discuss the assignments for next week. Okay, so after class, I came here in the taxi with my friend. All right, well, I can see here my main subject, verb, and object. I came here. And then I notice, okay, I've got some other words in here. Looks like some phrases. After looks like a connector word. And in, connector word. And with, connector word. So let me ask, because for example, one thing is I remember a with boy, right? At, with, in, for, from, a with boot, by, on, of, and to. So I look and I've got in and with already. I've got my with boot. So I know I've likely got two prepositions here. And then after appears to be one as well. Well, let's check. Okay, so let me start with the one after. After class. Now what follows after? The word class. Is it followed by a noun? Yes. The word class. Now again, I ask myself, okay, I do have a noun there, class. Now what comes before the preposition? Okay, well, here I've got a problem. Because before the preposition is nothing. Okay, so the rule of proximity, I'm in trouble here. Because, okay, there is nothing before the preposition. So the rule of proximity is not going to help me in this case necessarily. So then what do? Well, okay, I got to go the other direction. Let me look at the next possibility after the prepositional phrase. I know it's not class, right? Class is the object of the preposition, so it's not modifying that. All right, after class is my prepositional phrase. So then I go to I. All right, so the rule of proximity, so the next possible word is I. Now remember my question, does that make sense? Does some way after class modify I? Is it saying something about I? What kind of I? Which I? Describing I? Right? There's nothing that makes sense. So by the rule of proximity going the other direction, my next possibility is came. Can that make sense? Is there some way that after class could modify came?
Yes.
There's some way that after class I need to learn how to type
It
fast.
answers the question about time.
Yes. And I would say, is there? Yes. If after class
This was the question one.
is telling us when. Okay, again, I go back up to my questions here. Oops, I should have been 2 and 3 really are kind of together on this. So I go, okay, when, and if it's answering question when, then it will modify a verb. Came is a verb, so that can make sense. So I go with that. So basically my summary is after class modifies came, telling us when I came. All right, so here's a case where we have a prepositional phrase that comes at the beginning of the sentence. So there's nothing before it. But we look, okay, if that's the case, then we look the other direction. All right, and the first possibility is the subject I, but that didn't make sense. But then the next possibility was came. That did make sense. All right, so we go with that. That makes the most sense here. Now, there's another let's just take it down here. In. In is my next possibility. I know from a with boot where the I there is in, that's going to likely be a preposition. So I ask myself, is it followed by a noun? In this case, it is. Taxi, the taxi. So it is a prepositional phrase. And then my next question is, what comes before the preposition? Because that's usually the word it modifies. So in this case, it is here. So I ask myself, does here make sense in that context? Is there some way that in the taxi modifies here? And again, I ask myself then, does it answer any of these questions and still make sense? All right, and I can't think of anything that would. So then I ask myself, okay, if it's not here, then I go to the next possibility, which is came. Is there some way that in the taxi modifies came? What do you guys think? Is there some way that can make
Answers
sense?
the question how. Answers the question how.
Answers the question how. All right, so we would say yes. It answers the question how. Which again, I check how means it's going to modify a verb. The verb here I'm saying it modifies is came, so that makes sense. So my summary is, in the taxi modifies came, telling us how I came. All right? And that's interesting because the preposition is that word in, which normally would be a location, but in this case, it's telling us a means or how something happened. All right? Okay, I know this is tedious. I know it's painful. Just stay with me. We'll keep working our way through. This is like, I told you guys before, right? When I was a young man, my grandfather, he got gold fever. Did I tell you that story in class? My grandfather wanted to find gold one summer. I was about maybe 9 or 10 years old. And so he went all around. We lived in the mountains, and he drove to all during the summer. We drove to all these different rivers, and I had I think it's right. Cagayan is a gold pan.
Yeah.
Right. So
Cagayan de
a pan. So Cagayan de Oro. So I had one of those, and the whole summer I'm looking for gold, right? By panning in the water and, swishing the water around, getting the dirt off to see if I can find. Oh, it was so tedious. It was so painful. It was like worse than nosebleeds, worse than doing English grammar every day for hours and hours, because we kept doing this over and over. My hands got sore and my arms. And after a whole summer, we had 3 tiny flakes of gold. No treasure. But we spent a lot of time. Now, I learned how to pan for gold pretty well, but it was very tedious, very difficult. But it had to be in order to, if you did it too fast, then the gold could fly out of the pan. And so you had to be very careful. And so, we are digging for gold in a sense, right? The psalmist calls this God's word much fine gold, sweeter than honey from the honeycomb, right? In Psalm chapter 19. So we are panning for gold here, men, and panning for gold, you know, is a very tedious, can be a tedious process. So I know this is difficult. I know this is the word tedious comes to my mind, just can be difficult, labor, a lot of thinking, but that's part of this process. Is we got to get used to what are we looking for, because as you get better at doing that, then you'll see it more easily. And so I'm just trying to help you see the sort of the process and going through it step by step with you. So I'm hoping that as we do several examples, that will help you to see things more quickly as we do more together. So for example, let's just do the last one and then we'll talk about our assignments process here. So the last one that I have here is with my friend. All right. And I ask myself, is with followed by a noun? Well, it's immediately followed by the personal pronoun, but that modifies friend. So yeah, friend is the noun. Okay. So it follows that. Now what comes before the preposition? The word taxi. So again, we have to ask ourselves the question, okay, rule of proximity says that with my friend should modify taxi.
No.
Does that make sense?
But it doesn't make sense.
No, there's nothing about that phrase with my friend that could describe a taxi or tell me which taxi or tell me you know, what kind of a taxi. So we would say, no, that doesn't make sense. So okay, I've got to go to the next possibility. Now it's not going to be the preposition in. Okay. So I have to go to here. Here. That's my next possibility. And I ask myself, does that make sense? Is with my friend somehow describing here?
Yes. Yes. With whom?
Okay.
Answers the question with whom.
Yeah, with whom, but here is not a person. Right? So I don't know if that particular question that it's really indicating that question, answering that question. In this case, I came here with my friend. Is with my friend somehow modifying that word here? Is there some way we could describe it? I mean, I can't see a way that would make sense. Here is a location.
So came.
Yeah, the next possibility is came. Can that make sense?
Came with. Yes, with came.
Yeah, this can make sense if it's answering the question how I came. Came with my friend.
The most sensible.
That's the most reasonable. All right. So this does require a sense of the language, you know, a sense of how the words are working as well. But this essentially is the process that we're going to need to consider as we look at some passages. So next week, I'll pull up a passage in Ephesians, and we'll just sort of walk through each verse in this particular passage, kind of follow this process. You know, really, we're going to ask over and over what makes sense in the context. And then when we're asking that, we're really asking the question, we're really asking ourselves, which question here is answered by, which question is answered by the prepositional phrase? That's what we're saying when we mean, does it make sense? Okay. All right. Well, let's pick this up next week when our minds are more fresh, and we'll try some more examples. And hopefully, if things don't make any sense to you, stay with us. And hopefully, if enough examples, some things will start to click as far
It makes
as
sense,
what
Pastor
we're doing
Tim.
here. Okay. Well, that's good.
It is really helping a lot.
Yes.
Only we have to be really applying our minds to it to really engage.
And this is what we'll do with the diagramming. This is the question we're always answering in the diagram. Okay, I've got this phrase. Where does it connect? What does it modify? What makes sense? And with a preposition, the first thing you check is the word right before. Now, I don't know the percentage, but more than half the time, it will modify that word. But as we see in these examples, that's not always the case. All right, so we have to ask that question, does it make sense? But usually you can start with the idea of the word right before. Yeah.
Could it be helpful if we have to look for the main sentence first or the main verb first, then we'll connect the prepositions, like for example in that sentence, I came here after class, or I came in the taxi, or I came with my friend. So we can weigh things out, or the sentence that it makes sense if I say just I came in the taxi, or I came with my friend, or I came after class. I came here after class, so that we can easily distinguish or recognize if it makes sense or not.
Yeah, and that's what, when we actually are doing the diagram, we do, right? That's the first step. We identify the main clause of the sentence. And then we look from there, okay, what are the other phrases and clauses that we have? So I'm just trying to focus attention on prepositions only right now. But yeah, if you were to look at this sentence here, this is, right, the main clause goes here, I came here. All right, after class is modifying came because it's telling when. In the taxi is telling us how, and then also with my friend. So in this case, all three prepositional phrases are modifying the action here, okay? Now before, when we went over this in class, I sort of just, I went right to this. I didn't tell you like all this other stuff because we didn't have time to go through. I just sort of, hope that you had an understanding of prepositions and how they work. And what we notice in this sentence is that each of these prepositions are actually modifying the verb came. So the rule of proximity really is only working for in the taxi in this case. But in the other example we looked at up here, the first example, if I can get us to it, the students are at school. In this case, at school did modify the word right before, so the rule of proximity was followed in that sentence. And then I think she walked between the posts. Again, between the posts did modify walk, so the rule of proximity worked for us there. But these last two sentences show us that it doesn't always take place that way. But yeah, we can do that next time, we'll just start with identifying the main clause, because that's always the first step anyway. And then we'll just look for prepositions as our connector words for in the passage we look at. But yeah, that's a good reminder about that, Escarzon. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? That's enough pain and suffering for one morning, huh?
Yeah. Pastor Tim.
Yeah.
This is very, very crucial, because if this does not make sense to us, nothing will.
Yeah. Well, it's
We always anticipate this suffering every Tuesday.
It's like exercise, right?
We're looking forward to it.
When you go,
we are using it when it comes.
When it comes.
That's correct,
Yeah.
Pastor Tim. The Timothy says bodily exercise.
Yeah, there you go.
Profitable,
Profit it a little.
but this is more comfortable.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. It's like, yeah, it's like exercise though, right? If you go out and, if you run a long way or you do lift weights and afterwards you're sore, in the middle of it, it's hard, but when you're done, I remember when I would run long distances, and when I was finished, during the run was bad, it was hard, but after I was done, my body sort of like, it was good for my body. So I felt really good after it was over. So here, let me just remind you a couple things in the last few minutes as we are turning. Can everybody see the assignment schedule here on the screen? Can you guys all see that?
Yes.
Okay. I sent this to you a couple weeks ago. I will send it again just so you have it. What I'd like to do from this point on is we need to make progress towards completing Module 2 and moving toward Module 3. Some of you have completed several of these assignments. I think one or two of you have done almost all of them, or a few of you have. Some of you need to begin completing these. So I'm going to now help you be accountable to finish these assignments. So we're going to start next week. Part of our Zoom meeting, I'm going to talk about the assignment. So we're going to start with assignment 1. That's the background and literary context. Okay. So I want you to, next week, we'll continue to talk about the prepositions, but then the last hour or so the first half will focus on the discussions we're having for diagramming and continue making progress in that. But the second half of our Zoom meeting, I'm gonna go through what's required for the assignment for that week. And this will give you an opportunity to ask any specific questions you might have about your passage or any general questions about the assignment. So my encouragement is this. So next Monday, or Tuesday, sorry, your time. Next Tuesday, we'll have our Zoom meeting at the regular time, 10 a.m. to noon. And we'll spend the first half discussing the exegesis and what we're doing there. In the second half, we will talk about this assignment, background literary context for your Old Testament passage, Ruth or Jonah. All right. And so I would encourage you to work on your assignment, if you haven't worked on it yet, to work on it now so that you have some idea when the meeting comes. If you have any questions about your assignment, then you can ask them. But if you don't do anything on your assignment until October 30th, well, then I can't help you if you have a question on it. So what I want you to do is start working on the assignment now if you haven't yet, so that you have it done or have a good portion done by the time we meet, then if there's any questions, I'll happily answer them. And then you can then turn in the assignment on Canvas by the due date shown. All right. And then we'll go the following Zoom meeting on October 3rd. We'll continue for the first hour on exegesis and working on the lessons we've been doing. But then the second hour, I'll focus attention on the next assignment for your narrative passage, character and setting analysis. I'll go through the assignment format, make sure, do you have any questions about the format? And then if you have any specific questions about your passage, that will be the time to ask. All right. And then that will be due three days later on Canvas. All right. And so we're just going to do that each week from now on. Make sure that you've got that week's assignment done. Now, if you've already done the assignment, you are welcome to go back and redo it if you want. That's perfectly fine, and resubmit it. That's up to you. But if you've already submitted it, and I'll make sure to be grading as well and stay with you, keep the same pace. So if you turn it in on the 31st, then Lord willing, the next day or the day after that, I'll have it graded, give you feedback. All right. And we're just going to do that week by week, so that after 6 weeks, you'll need to have all of your assignments for your first passage completed, so that in the 2 weeks following, you can preach that passage. All right. And for preaching the text, let me remind you, I've put the comments up here you can read through specifically, but what I'd like you to do is, in preaching that passage, is provide me, record it, and provide me that link. Now, if you've already preached it, or if you're going to preach it as part of a teaching time for a church service, or for some kind of a Sunday school or fellowship group or something, that's fine. If you record that, you can send that to me. But if you haven't, you're going to need to do a special session where you record yourself preaching that sermon. That's not the ideal, but that's the best I think we can do right now. Now, Pastor Bowlby had suggested in the past maybe some of you gathering together, and you're welcome to do that and sort of preach to whoever is able to gather. You'll still need to record that so that I can be able to give you feedback and grade it. All right. Now, my hope is that after we do this for the first passage, we'll go through the same process for your New Testament passage. And I'm hoping by February next year, we'll see, but I'm hoping I might be able to travel there. Then we can preach everything in person. We'll have to see if that'll work. But the main thing I want to communicate to you guys is just make sure, so by the 31st, everyone needs to have turned in their first assignment. Everyone needs to have submitted it to Canvas. All right? Because if you get behind now, I mean, it's just we can't recover. You won't be done in time for the next module. And everyone needs to be done to start so we can start the next module. All right? So it's been over a year now since we met together in module 2.
Very vicious, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, you've had a lot of extra time. Okay, and COVID has made things difficult. I understand that. So I'm trying to make it a way for you to get these things done so that we can complete what we need to, and that'll help us then be ready for module 3. All right. Okay. Any questions on that? Does it make sense? I hope. Like prepositional phrase, does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Next time, Pastor Tim, if you're able to come, you will have to teach us gold panning.
Oh. Yeah, that was a, yeah, I don't know. But it was it was a nice memory with my Lolo, just he and I and for the summer. So I appreciate it now, but when I was 9 years old, I did not. So,
But seriously, Pastor Tim, you've been teaching us that all this while.
panning for gold in the Bible,
Real
right?
gold. This is real gold.
Okay, so thank you for that, and I hope this will allow you guys to be able to get your assignments turned in, and so we can make progress, like I said. So I really want us all to finish this course together. I think if you stay with it, you'll find that it will have benefits. But you got to stay with it, because there's a lot for us to learn when it comes to poetry and prophecy as well. There's still a lot in front of us that I want you to be comfortable studying and preaching from any part of the Bible. And I know for some of us, there are parts of the Bible that are scary.
Amen. Amen.
Like,
Amen.
oh,
Praise
Old
God.
Testament prophecy? No way. I don't know what's going on there. I'm going to stay in the epistles. So I really want you guys to feel more confident and comfortable teaching from all parts of the Bible, and be confident that you're being accurate, And but we got to get through this module 2 in order to be prepared for module 3, and then get through module 3 to be prepared for module 4. And then by that time, when we get to module 5, we'll come back around and start looking at what we covered. And you know what? At that time, you'll see a lot more that you didn't see the first time. Okay? So, all right, I've talked enough. You guys are tired and hungry. So, unless there's any more
Pastor Tim,
questions. Yes.
There's a saying, an anecdote that says, if there is a mist in the pulpit, there will be a fog in the pew.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that. I can't remember who said that, but yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. If we're confused or not clear or not sure, then certainly those who are listening to us aren't going to understand. And there's so many features or characteristics of each biblical genre that we really need to be aware of that. Like we've seen with stories, narratives, there's a lot of other features, character analysis, scene analysis, looking at what the narrator says, understanding the plot. That's very different than preaching from Galatians, which is instructional, it's didactic, it's just logical, it flows. But a story, as we've seen, that is different. The truth is being expressed in a different way. And poetry will have the same kinds of things, as well as prophecy. And so we have to make sure we understand, so we don't fall into the minefields that so many pastors fall into when they preach from these other genres. And we want what the author meant. What did he intend? That's what we're after. So we need to learn how to find that from these different genres. Okay. All right, guys. Well, let me ask Sir Sid if you could close us in prayer, and just pray for our week and what we aim to get done for next week, and we appreciate that.